Hi guys, I am live now with the July 2018 Patron stream. God, my hair looks good today. Look at these fucking tendrils. I'm not wearing any jewelry. Well, whatever. Jewelry is... it's bourgeois decadence. Alright, question time. Mishka Bear says, have you watched the TV show Pose? If so, thoughts. If not, you should, just for the positive trans representation. So, I watched the first episode of Pose last night, and I liked it a lot. I knew I was gonna like it right away, because in the first scene, like, a bunch of like trans women and drag queens break into a museum in New York, and they steal a bunch of like 17th and 18th century like royal costumes, and not costumes, period clothing, and they wear them at a ball competition, runway competition, and like I was like, all right, this is the kind of zany stuff I'm here for. I'm gonna like this show, but it gets so heavy so fast that like I was like, oh god, like this is gonna be one of those like issues shows, isn't it? Because for me, I usually watch TV like when I'm eating and like right before bed and stuff, like, so I tend to like prefer stuff that's a little more mindless. So I wouldn't usually watch a drama that's gonna make me think about issues, but I'll probably watch Pose because it's so like, I don't know, it's close to home. And also like I'm happy that there's like to have a show that has like actual trans representation in it. And like I never watched like Transparent, and now I don't feel like I need to. I guess I should also watch Sense8. I've watched like the first episode of Sense8. I don't watch a lot of TV, except for like mindless stuff that I'm too ashamed to tell you guys what I watch. But like I don't watch a lot of serious TV, but yeah, I should watch. I do intend to watch the rest of Pose. The episodes are long, but I liked the first one, so I'll probably do it. Ryan Mickler says, what are your thoughts on the IDW? Are we just dealing with a more mainstream, regressive, conservative... IDW, intellectual dark web. Okay. Are we dealing with a more mainstream, regressive conservatism, repackaged as classical liberalism, or is this potentially a forum in which we could engage thoughtfully and argue our progressive ideals? I'm quite torn. Obviously, you've talked about good old Dave Rubin a few times, and he's objectively insufferable, but the Weinsteins, for example, talk some sense. Just a thought. Yeah, so not everyone in that, like, intellectual dark web group is, like, horrible. Or, well, they're not all equally bad. But I personally have just given up on that. Like, I used to be like, I want to be on Dave Rubin so I can... And at this point, like, I don't know. If a Dave Rubin invited me to be on his show, I might go just to go. But like, at this point, I don't really have any faith that that is going to be a like productive conversation. And what I think is that, I mean, one of the reasons I was so engaged with those people to start with, was that there was very little like leftist presence on YouTube or on like mainstream, like, well, not mainstream, but like in internet discussion at all. Like it was all like hidden away in like Discord servers and stuff, you know. And now on YouTube there's this big increasing like left tube thing happening, and so I don't feel as much as I used to that I need these people as interlocutors, because we have an alternative community with its own kinds of platforms. And so I don't feel that I don't feel it's as necessary to directly engage as I used to. Festfall says, do you feel like sexual harassment is okay if it's directed at a sexual harassment apologist like Jordan Peterson? I liked your video about him, but the sexual humor in the bath and with the nicknames had me wondering about that. Same goes for the golden one. I asked some of the Discord chat members what they thought, and they told me it was a bad idea to defend Nazis. Another told me it was your way of feeling empowered or empowering others. Another claimed sexual harassment is okay if it's not directed at someone with less power than you. I love your videos and have learned so much from you, but this has genuinely bugged me. I wasn't offended by the jokes, but when I showed my friends your video, as I'm wont to do, I got this question and started to wonder if it weakened your credibility or the credibility of those who claim rape culture is a problem. Alright. So, I think that what I want to dispute, I don't want to say it's okay to sexually harass people who are in favor of sexual harassment. I think that I'm just not really convinced that I'm sexually harassing Jordan Peterson. I think that Jordan Peterson is not my professor. He's not my student. He's not my coworker. He's an internet celebrity. Me making a video where I jokingly seduce him, I personally don't think that's sexual harassment. I think that we don't have any need to be near each other. We don't have any relationship with each other. And I think that it's obvious that I'm not seriously coming onto him. Like, yes, it is kind of like, and like, again, it's about context, right? Because I probably wouldn't do that with a woman, but it's because of the reason I'm doing this, right? Is because of the kind of persona that Jordan Peterson sets up. And this idea of him as daddy, I'm like taking his own like sort of sexual persona and playing with it. So, as far as being like rape culture, here's the question to ask yourself. Like, is me pretending for a joke to seduce a college professor twice my age in some way normalizing a coercive kind of sexual relationship? I don't think it is. I don't think it is. So I don't know. I don't know. All right, let's see if we can recover from that. Chelsea Williams says, in the art of treating everyone the same, I refer to everyone as them, they, their, or ones, unless I am informed of one's preferred pronouns. I have never had a complaint from a cis person. I often have trouble identifying people's gender, especially for the youth. This really helps me prevent misgendering someone. What is your opinion of this? Mixed. I think that in certain situations, like when I'm doing fan meetups, I will often sort of default to they more than I would, because I know that there's like going to be like a lot of non-binary people and people whose presentation may not necessarily match their identity. But unless I know that I'm with a group of people where that specifically is likely to be the case, I don't usually go to neutral by default, and I take cues from presentation. But because I think that in my case, like if someone calls me they, them pronouns, I consider that misgendering. And the reason for that is that I have noticed that a lot of conservatives will do this. If they refuse to call me she, and they intuitively sense that calling me he would be very aggressive and very rude, so they kind of attempt to forge a middle ground by calling me they, but it's misgendering. It's still taking a stand against treating me like a woman or calling me a woman, and it's just misgendering. So I think that of course, it's like some people are always going to be offended that you like, oh, you didn't guess what my identity was based on my, ambiguous presentation. I personally think that in most situations it is fine to take cues from presentation, with the understanding that if you're wrong, you of course just apologize and correct yourself. But I think that there's some situations, like I said, where there's going to be a lot of like non-binary people or a lot of early transition trans people, and situations like that, then I do think that just the default they is more reasonable. The Scotch in the North says, I very much appreciated the Adria cameo and the whole plate appearance. Do you have any plans to introduce us to the other members of her and Tabby's beautiful fash bashing polycule? I don't have any specific plans, although I have a strong feeling this is not the last we've heard about this polycule, and I'm sure it would be, I've sort of left the door open for myself creatively so that I can come back to this group of people whenever I want. But I don't have any specific plans, no. Annoyance says, how have things been since the last AMA? What are something you're excited for? Things have been good. I've just been super busy. And I'm working on a new video, which I was hoping to have out by the end of July, but it's not. No way it's going to happen. So it'll be out sometime in the first week or two of August. So I'm excited about that. I'm mostly done with the script, so I it's about a topic that, well, I'm excited about it. Ms. Contrary says, not so much a question, but a small request. Would you be so kind as to wish me luck for my burlesque recital Saturday? Absolutely. Good luck. That sounds like a lot of fun. Um, yeah, good luck. Have fun. Break a leg, etc. I don't know. um, think of me. All right. Joshua Hickok says, a lot of the so-called New Left is Marxist-ish, but overly educated and obsessive listeners like me have noticed that you have said kind things about Rorty. I think the left has a gaping hole between classical liberalism and Marxism that Rorty thought he, Rawls, and Dewey were filling. Are you friendly towards Rorty's experimental progressive democracy as an alternative to Marxism? What can I say that will not get me in trouble? I think that I am interested in it, and I'm interested in Rorty. I'm not someone who, I don't like to label myself. People often ask me, like, are you a Marxist? And I'm like, well, to me, Marxism it's not an identity. Like, I don't have a political identity. I've noticed that lately there's this trend where people talk about like what they identify as. Like, I think even in like like, you know, like the Rational Wiki article about me and articles about me tend to say that like they're like, Natalie Wynn identifies as a socialist or whatever, or they say like I identify as my political. It's like, I'm sorry, like my political position. It's not like a gender, right? It's not like identity. I don't think your political worldview should be an identity. I think it should be a perspective. So I think Marxism is a way of looking at the world. It's not an identity. And do I sometimes use the Marxist way of looking at the world? Yes. Do I sometimes use the progressive democracy way of looking at the world? Yes. And I don't really have a dogmatic adherence to one school of thought over the other, but I think both perspectives are interesting and both have ideas that are sort of worth trying. Jessica Loganoff says, thank you so much for reminding me. We have to talk to people who disagree with us. What do you eat for breakfast when you're sick of breakfast food? Well, you're welcome, Jessica. Yeah, I actually don't usually eat breakfast food, but what I've been eating lately is pasta. Like, I wake up at a crisp noon and I make a pot of pasta, which because I'm like conscious about my weight, which I know I shouldn't admit that because people get all crazy about it. Like, I know I'm thin, but I'm trying to stay thin. And like, I find that pasta, like, I try all kinds of like diet things, and doing like dieting things, like, oh, I'm gonna try to eat tiny portions and I'm gonna not throw out carbs and stuff, that actually doesn't work for me because it just makes me, I just get hungrier and hungrier all day, and then I'm like, I can't stand it anymore, and I'll eat a bunch of garbage at the end of the day. So the good thing about pasta is if you eat pasta with, this is a lot of advice no one asked for. If you eat pasta with like tomato sauce, like, yeah, it's a lot of carbs, but it's also a lot of protein. You can like get like whole wheat pasta. It's a lot of fiber, and it makes you so full. So like when I eat like even like a big plate of pasta, like at worst that's gonna be like 600-700 calories. So that's not that much, and if that fills you up for like the whole first half of the day, like, you're in pretty good shape. So I find that that's actually a pretty effective way of calorie restriction without like starving yourself. Um, wow, that's too much information. I'm not good at answering these questions, guys. Like, I feel like either I give like really like inadequate answers that don't really answer the question, or I just like spew out a whole bunch of stuff that no one asked to know. All right, Sean Oscar says, I recently found out that 2 of my old philosophy lecturers are TERFs. Oh dear God. But I'm not surprised. There's a lot of that in philosophy. Or gender critical feminists, as they're calling themselves. I'm cis, and I want to be as good an ally as I can be, so I tried twice to engage with them in philosophical discussion. In one case, I was accused of not caring about sexual violence against women. And in the other, the conversation just died because became obvious the conceptual divide between us was just too wide. So my question is there any value in trying to philosophically argue with people who hold those views? Does it help? So in my experience, honestly, it doesn't. I've never really found that I can like convince someone who's like in the turf rabbit hole that like trans people are a legitimate thing. Like, and a lot of the reason for that it's difficult to do that is that most of those like turf arguments, like, oh, we have to defend women against sexual violence, like these are not really these are like smokescreen arguments, right? The person is bigoted, right? And they think that they just have this dogma, this sort of gut level dogma. They're like, no, like there's only two genders and you cannot move from one to the other. It's essential, right? Like you're born a man or a woman and that's what you always are. And they, instead of arguing that, will start arguing all these like baroque other things. There's like a superstructure to the arguments, right? Where they're not really talking about the foundational issue. And they obfuscate by talking about like, oh, predatory trans women in bathrooms or whatever. And it's like, I've just found that maybe I'm just bad at this particular argument because I'm too close to it and I get too emotional or something. But like, I've never found that I can actually talk anyone out of a position like that. No, unfortunately, no. And I have less patience for it than I do with some other things that don't as directly influence me, where I am able to sort of go at it for longer. So if you want to try it, by all means, but like, I'm not good at it. Ree Carter says, on a scale of album of chill piano jams to stand-up comedy, what's a creative endeavor you'd like to try other than political videos? Well, I could actually see doing either of those two suggestions. I actually always have wanted to try stand-up comedy, although I don't. It seems I'm like super intimidated by it because it seems so hard. Like it seems like the hardest thing you could do. It's so nerve-wracking. But I also feel like it would be helpful. Like I feel like one problem with doing comedy on YouTube is you don't get immediate audience response. Like people tell me my videos are funny, so I think I'm probably sort of good at comedy, at least, right? But like, I also don't see people watch my video. I don't see when they laugh or when they don't laugh. So I sort of don't know what jokes are landing and which ones aren't. So that's like a piece of information I'm missing that sort of keeps me from improving as fast as I think a stand-up comic might. So yeah, I would like to try that. I think it would be helpful for my comedy, but I'm also scared. Jesse Hansen says, I recently had a conversation with a friend about FFS, facial feminization surgery, and whether it should be covered by insurance, as Starbucks recently started to do, or paid by the NHS in the UK and the rest of Europe. My friend argued that it was unfair to cis people who also want cosmetic, quote unquote, surgery, and that at some point there has to be some level of self-acceptance. I argue that FFS is a life-changing surgery and that it's not cosmetic. It's reparative to counter the effects of testosterone and to lower suicide risk among a high-risk minority. Should FFS be covered by insurance or healthcare services in Europe? How can we explain the distinction between dysphoria and cosmetic vanity to cis people? Have you considered doing a video on this topic? So I don't have like an easy answer to that question, because I think that dysphoria and what you're calling cosmetic vanity actually probably exist on something like the same spectrum. I agree that a trans woman getting facial feminization surgery, it's not really the same as a cis woman getting, I don't know, a nose job or something, but it's not entirely dissimilar either. And, especially since a lot of times FFS does involve rhinoplasty. Like, I'll probably get rhinoplasty, and I'm not quite sure. Actually, I have difficulty sussing out in my head, like, how much of this is gender dysphoria and how much of it is just woman dysphoria. Like, increasingly, I think that, as I talk to more cis women about this, I realize that cis women are largely very dysphoric about their bodies, about their faces, about, I think society is just very harsh on women's appearances in general, about aging, about And like, part of, I think the purpose of transition actually is for trans women, sadly, it's not to get rid of dysphoria altogether. It's just to reduce it down to the sort of, typical levels of female self-hate. And so I guess it's difficult to say where one stops and where the other begins. But I do think that in the case of trans people, I don't have this study on hand, but someone told me, I have to do some research to confirm or deny this, but someone told me that research shows that facial feminization actually has the highest average net impact on trans women's happiness, more so than the surgery, than genital reassignment, that is. And I think that in view of that, I mean, it's kind of could be considered a fairly important like mental health intervention, and it sort of depends on like what you're working with to begin with. But I think that for a lot of trans women who have like masculine, like unambiguously masculine features, it really is a kind of a necessity. Like, and that is, it has the potential to really, really make life easier, in a way that's not really just vanity. It's like a matter of safety and a matter of just like ability to function in day-to-day life, as like a normal person who blends in. I think that people tell me all the time, you don't need facial feminization surgery. Your face is so feminine already. Well, they're probably right. I probably don't need it. I mean, I'm probably going to pay $30,000 out of pocket for FFS sometime in the next couple of years. I'm saving the money. And, I know that a lot of people tell me you don't need it, but like, to me, it's not even just about like what I need. It's about what I see in the mirror and just like my ability to accept myself. I just need to see something different. I need to see something that doesn't look to me like my old male face. It just, there's almost nothing there's no amount of money that seems like too much just to fix that. So do I think it should be covered by insurance? Well, I think, yeah, in short, because I think that I'm privileged enough where I can afford it without, but a lot of trans women, I mean, looking at how expensive it is, there's just no way they could get it without it being covered by insurance. So I do think that, I know some people do have it covered by insurance, and honestly, I think it should be covered. All right, let's see. Personhead says, I constantly hear from SJW critics that we don't care about economic issues, and I feel this is a false dichotomy. Do you agree? As a severely mentally ill, unemployed gay man who grew up in an abusive working-class household in remote Queensland, social and economic issues are inseparable to me. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think that this is exactly the reason why this like SJWs should talk more about economics thing is stupid, because like feminism is an economic issue. Trans rights and gay rights, these are economic issues. Like Black Lives Matter, that's an economic issue. Like as if there's not a huge economic component to these things. Like as if like workplace discrimination for trans people, or like the wage gap for women, or just, police violence against people of color, and like, the bad schools and black communities in Baltimore, and lead poisoning, and Flint with no water. Like this is all economic stuff. And a lot of what we're talking about the oppression of these marginalized groups. People sometimes talk about identity politics, like it's like, oh, we're just playing this game with this purely. This is why I try to move. I don't like identity. I don't even like talking about what people identify as, or because to me that obfuscates what the actual problem is. The problem is not identity. And identity politics isn't politics about psychology. It's politics about material circumstances. So there's nothing non-Marxist in the broadest sense, right? There's nothing non-Marxist about identity politics. Identity politics is about material well-being of certain communities. And I totally agree with you. Yeah, I totally agree. That's a point to emphasize. Okay. Wednesday, La Rocha Almond, I guess, says, hey Nat, do you consider yourself to be a horror movie buff? Do you have any least favorite genres? Yeah, probably if there's any genre that's my favorite, it is probably horror. So oh my god, I saw Hereditary a few weeks ago, and I saw it like it was like basically on a date. It had this like not a good date movie. I was like, oh god, why did I choose this? This is like so much decapitation and and like, but I thought it was really good. It was just really disturbing. I also other ones I loved Get Out. I love The Witch. I love The Babadook. I love It Follows. Yeah, I love horror movies, and there's so many good ones lately. Um, so I guess my horror might actually be my favorite genre. Um, I don't know what else do I watch. Mostly that, I guess, and just I'm not, I'm so surrounded by movie people. I just kind of let them like tell me what to watch a lot of the time. I guess the world has YouTube has so many opinions about movies. They don't need me. Okay, let's see. Dead Lugosi's questions says, uh, question spam. Please feel free to answer any or none as you like. What's the last book you read that will stay with you for a long time? Oh, I have to choose one of these questions. Let's see. What was the last book that will stay with me for a long time in a good way? What was the last book that I read? You guys always. I wish I read like more smart intellectual stuff instead of just reading David Sedaris all the time. Um, what's the last book that I read that stays with me for a long time in a good way? Probably the autobiography of Quentin Crisp. I know I've talked about it in these streams before when people ask the book questions. That I think about Quentin Crisp all the time. Look up who that is if you guys don't know. You also ask about, oh, I do like the things, Dead Lugosi. Yeah, I actually love that like silk flower thing. Like, it's very, I feel very, I feel very art teachery in it, which is an aesthetic that I like. So thank you. Wobbly Joe says, "What is Adorno's problem with jazz?" Probably that he's kind of racist. Like, I think that's basically what it comes down to. I mean, people always try to make excuses for the guy. They're like, well, he came out of Nazi Germany and he was traumatized by mass media, and like, yeah, that's all true. But I do think that this idea of he basically thought that jazz was degenerate. Like, that's basically what his argument is. And is that basically racist? Yeah. So I don't know what else to say. I think that that jazz is degenerate, no matter how traumatized you are by Nazis. Like, that's just still a Nazi argument, and I think subconsciously that's still in there somewhere. I'm sure it's in his psychology. Um, Populux says, "Hi Natalie, I hope the summer is treating you well." It is. I like summer, although it's so humid in Baltimore right now. It's like a swamp. Um, Now that your videos are becoming more visually elaborate, how do you direct, compose your shots? Theatrical blocking, pre-film illustrations, or just wing it and fix it in editing? Um, Also, your real talent at sketching characters. Were you a theater kid? Oh, thank you. So, I don't do illustrations or anything. What I do usually is before I get in costume or anything, I'll have like an idea in my head of how to do it. I'll put the camera there, and I'm using my laptop as like a monitor, so I plug that into the laptop, and then I just sit where I'm gonna sit when I'm filming, and I just move the camera around a little bit, and I move props around, and I change the colors of the lights and the positions of the lights until I find something that looks the way I want it to look. So that's basically how I will compose the shots. Just on set, and just by tinkering around and just seeing what looks good to me. I'm glad you like the characters. I actually was not a theater kid, surprisingly, but I am now. And to me, I guess I used to write fiction, so I know a little bit about creating characters from that. But the acting is really what's new to me. I've never really acted much until recently, so I don't know if I'm any good at it, but it seems to at least get the job done for what I'm doing. Amos Ben Israel says, hello. You seem to have a small but sturdy group of fans in Israel now. They send this question: what happened to Saul Saltzman? Will he come back as Selma Saltzman? There was also worried when the videos disappeared from your live channel. What happened? So Saul, I don't know. I've decided if he or she will come back. I'm not sure. Some people, there's a fan theory that says that Adria has the dead name Saul, which is possible. I don't know about that. I can neither confirm nor deny. But I've thought about it. I'm glad you liked the character. A lot of people like the character. It was a good character. The old live streams, I just don't feel comfortable having like live streams older than, at this point, like a few months up. I hope I'll get to a point where I don't mind older streams staying up for longer, but like because of mostly transition reasons, like I'm not even comfortable with like my old videos being up, but I just feel at this point that like this is like my career and my life's project, and that to like destroy half of my channel would just like, because other people aren't bothered by it, I'm the one who's bothered by it, but like I don't know. I feel like I worked on that stuff so hard that I don't want to just get rid of it, but also like I feel like a specimen in a petri dish up here, you know, and like I hate that people still watch. I guess like new people still find my channel, and like it would be so nice if they would just meet me, like the real me, but instead they meet me and they meet man me, like, and that never is gonna go away. And I don't know. I just feel like it's undermining my gender identity. It undermines my ability to pass like in the way that I want to. I don't know. I haven't figured out what I'm going to do about that. That's not what you asked. Okay, Skullgun says, so how are you feeling after you ate all those corn dogs? Oh, honey, I was feeling so filled up inside. I actually didn't eat that many of them because I was like, I can't have that many corn dogs in my, these are not like good calories, right? I can't have that many corn dogs in my body. So what I did was like, there's a few of those takes where I'm like deep throating it, and and what I actually did was like I would take it out of my mouth. It was really gross. I'm sorry. After I was done, so I didn't have to sit with 7 corn dogs in my stomach the rest of the day. Wow, that was. I'm feeling so attractive right now. All right, Dane Jacobs says, "Hey Natalie, this isn't really a question, but I've noticed you've used some images of deep space objects such as the Orion Nebula in backgrounds in some videos. I do astrophotography as a hobby, and if you ever want to borrow some of my images, you can. There are quite a few in a pink and blue color palette too." Oh, thank you. I will come back to this post if I need more of them. I appreciate it. Andrew Kowalski says, do you think that the She-Ra bullshit that happened was viral outrage marketing? That the ad team had a small to mid-sized poster create something and advertise it to the anti-feminists, who would spread it in outrage, which obviously would make it reach the target audience, follow anti-feminist watchdogs, thereby creating more outrage on the left end of the spectrum. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that like IHOB from a month ago was that, but I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I think that people actually did get that outraged by it, which is a little perplexing because I didn't even know who She-Ra was until this happened. Like, how many people are like devoted fans of She-Ra? I don't know. I don't think it was outrage marketing. No, I think it's just the usual thing happening. Avi Finkel says, "What do you think of Dan Savage?" All right, so I know that he's said some bad things. He's like, doesn't really understand bi people, doesn't really get trans people, I think, and he really should probably Dan Savage. He should probably keep quiet on those subjects a little more, but I think that I like his general perspective, um, and I like the way he thinks about sex, and for the most part, and I think he's been doing better lately. Like acknowledging, look, I know this is gonna make people upset. Like, feel free to complain in the comments if you don't agree. Like, I don't know. I think like I know he's not really woke on certain issues. He's sort of behind, but I think that I broadly like his perspective, and I'm not someone who I'm really very forgiving. Like, I am willing to tolerate a lot of foolishness from someone if I think that they're basically coming from the right place. So I think I kind of like the guy, to be honest, despite his flaws. We all have flaws. That level of flaw. Like, I'm sure I've said things at least as stupid as the things he said. So it's just part of life. Okay, Andrew Harris says, will there ever be a plastic action figure for Tabby? Viva Trans Antifa Cat Girls. I don't know why there isn't already. I'm not in the business of making plastic action figures, but if someone else wants to have at it with Tabby, by all means. I'm sure it'll be popular. Okay, Cami has... This looks like a lot of questions here. How do you feel about the constant celebration of mediocrity in the U.S., and how is it affecting us as a whole? All right, hold on. There's like several paragraphs here. I don't want to read all this out loud. Let's see. All right, so the gist of this comment is that this question is that why is it that there's so many mediocre Instagram famous YouTubers who get attention and like the great artists get overlooked? Well, that's just how it works, right? I mean, if you think about how, I don't think there's a celebration of mediocrity for its own sake. I think that if you look at mass media and mass culture, the stuff that's absolutely the hugest is the stuff with the widest audience, which means stuff that's by definition and by its nature sort of almost bland enough that it's not going to really offend anyone's sensibilities, and it's sort of easy. And I think there's a reason why easy stuff is going to be the most widely marketable. So I think it's always the case that like to get the absolute best music or the absolute best art or the absolute best whatever, like there's going to be a smaller group of people who appreciate that, just because content like that requires more work to consume, and it sometimes requires more expertise to appreciate. So I don't think it's anything particular to our society. I don't think there's some like celebration of mediocrity that's going on. I think it's just the nature of mass media that the stuff that requires, as I said, more expertise to understand, the stuff that is sort of avant-garde or sort of unusual, is going to sort of find a smaller audience because it's going to put a lot of people off for various reasons. Alice Steff says, how do you feel about Americentrism in YouTube and other resources for discussing social issues? Growing up in Greece, I found this a huge issue in finding a single source on the internet that doesn't frame, for example, racism in a way that is so blatantly American, and yet even the creators usually fail to acknowledge how weird their own country is. It's gotten to the point where I feel the amount of US-specific rhetoric online has basically marred discourse of important topics for me when trying to discuss them anywhere online. This is to an extent also a problem with resources in English. So I think that, I mean, part of the problem with the internet, right, is that we're all using English as a lingua franca, and because of that, and because of where these companies are based and where the sort of cultural center of all this stuff is, American voices are the loudest, and then other Anglosphere voices are sort of second to that. So I mean, I've been told, like, I haven't really looked that much, but I've been told that if you want to watch like videos on YouTube, for instance, about politics that are in Spanish or Greek or whatever, like, there's almost nothing there. So this is not really a problem I feel that I can do anything about, because I'm speaking about American politics to, which I'm American, so that's where I am, that's what I know. Um, for the American centricness of this to change, I think people still have to start making content designed for their own communities, like, and designed for their own countries. Um, as far as how to do that, I don't know. I don't know much about how to make videos or make content specifically aimed at non-American or say like a Greek audience. Something that I encourage you to figure out if you're curious about it, but it's something that I, as an American, I can't fix that, because I'm just talking about my own country, and because of the way the internet works and the way YouTube works, like, that's easy for me to do, and it's what a lot of other people are doing. Okay, Musu says, as a result of finding your channel, I have become more interested in trying to engage in persuasive argument with right-wing family members and old friends instead of just ignoring them. So thank you for inspiring me. You're welcome. Most of the folks in my social circle are evangelical, prosperity gospel Christians, and I have found that moral arguments against capitalism can actually be somewhat effective because they are already used to thinking of the world in terms of a moral crusade, perhaps from the influence of anti-abortion movement, and most of them are already inclined to dislike Trump for his obvious moral failings. But there's a second viewpoint I encounter less often that I have a lot more difficulty responding to, and that's a kind of fatalism that sees the Republican Party base for the death cult it is, but believes the left can never present a viable alternative regardless because cooperation is opposed to human nature. I don't buy that, and I replied that if you're working in an office and you ask someone for a pencil, they will probably just hand it to you instead of replying, "What will you give me for it?" But it seems like the ideas about human nature tend to be a lot stickier and harder to dislodge from someone's web of belief than just providing counterexamples can achieve. My question is, do you know of more effective ways I could try to argue against this kind of essentialism? I would say you can say that selfishness can only be expressed in, to the extent that it's politically allowed most of the time. Most people are selfish. So even I think most people are not selfish in many contexts, as you say, but in other contexts they are selfish. So you'll notice there's a reason that most of us don't kill people to get what we want, and a lot of the reason for that is we live in political and social conditions where that is highly discouraged, and in fact it's so discouraged that to most of us it doesn't even occur to us as really an option. We have this inbuilt sense of morality that we've been socialized to that sort of prevents us from even considering it. And so I think human nature can be, if you live in a society where sort of people take for granted that everyone gets free healthcare, for example, it's unlikely that people will question this once they get used to it as a norm. It's only as you try to change things that people say, oh, human nature will never allow this. Because of course people are used now, if they're not used to the idea that everyone gets healthcare, then the idea that people should get healthcare, it seems new and different. It's well, that's not the way I know things, therefore it's against human nature. I mean, I would just invite them to consider just the wide variety of societies that have existed and how different our society is from, say, I don't know, ancient Babylon or something. And that human nature is more flexible, I guess, than just whatever it looks like in the world around you. A lot of the way the people behave is not really human nature. It's just the product of your own history and society. Deng says, you've mentioned Wittgenstein a lot as your philosophical daddy, and that he informs your views on gender. How does that work with theories of gender like Judith Butler? Do you ever plan on making a video on him or just talking about him more explicitly? I probably wouldn't actually do a video on Wittgenstein because it's just too nerdy and too niche. But the video I'm working on now, actually, I'm again using very Wittgenstein-like ideas, and how does it work with theories of gender like Judith Butler? I think it works pretty well, actually, because with Judith Butler, there's an idea of performance. The overlap with performance and, Wittgenstein's idea of meaning is that performance and linguistic meaning, as Wittgenstein understands it, are both public. So in both cases, gender is social, it's public, it's behavioral. It's not interior psychological. It's not biological essential, right? Whether you understand it in terms of performance or meaning, both the Wittgenstein style approach and the Butler style approach will see first and foremost like social norms, social constructs, social behaviors, social gestures and utterances and all that kind of thing. So that's, I think, where the two of them fit together. I think if the fit is pretty good. Dymphomaniac says, earlier in your transition, you mentioned how weird it was that your doctor made a point of complimenting your looks. Now that you're looking into FFS, do you think she might have been speaking from experience on the effect of beauty culture on women? Do you mean that she was saying you mean she mentioned my looks because she thought I needed it, because I needed to hear that, or because she was trying to discourage me from getting surgery, or because she thought it was medically relevant? I'm just not sure what the question is. I think that when it comes to transitioning, your physical aesthetics are considered medically relevant. And is that bad? Maybe. It probably is bad in excess. But I think that, when it comes to trans care, doctors, they're thinking about integrating you into society, which involves considerations of how you look and the expectations likely to be thrust upon you, including the expectations that we have of women, including the unfair ones. So I think that that's sometimes very conformist and bad, but also sometimes it's simply realistic. So I don't know. It's kind of a balance, I guess. Joe Pratt says, weird question. Do you have a favorite Mountain Goats album song? All the good internet leftists seem to love the Mountain Goats, so was curious. I actually have no idea what Mountain Goats are, so I'm apparently a bad internet leftist because I don't know this band. I'll have to check them out. Very witty username says, how did you first come across Zoe Blade? Did you find her music by coincidence, or did someone recommend it to you? Also, I love her music, and I think it fits in really well with your videos. So Zoe came to me. She had done some music for Zinnia Jones, and she came to me being like, hey, here's some music you can use for free. And later I started commissioning stuff from her, starting with some of the music she did in the gender dysphoria video, and now I just sort of regularly commission music from her. But she found me instead of the other way around, and I agree. Her music works very well with my aesthetic. And I think she writes music specifically for my aesthetic when she does stuff for me, so it's a very good fit, yeah. Dead Lugosi says, have you watched Nanette, the Hannah Gadsby performance on Netflix? If you have, I'd be interested to hear your initial reactions and any thought you had about it. I did watch it, yes. I liked it. I think she's very funny. I think that it's nice to see a perspective of someone we're not using to see in stand-up comedy. Though I also think that I think that special, the second half of the special goes outside of what to me is comedy, because at some point the goal is not making us laugh. The goal is just venting anger, or it's communicating something about that anger. Now, she's not the first comic to do that. I mean, George Carlin in his later career would do that all the time. Like, he would just get up on stage and rant. So I'm happy that the cis white men don't have the monopoly on getting up on stage and ranting anymore. But I also prefer a comedy that makes me laugh. I mean, that said, as like a kind of performance art, I think Nanette is powerful. I think it's a valuable perspective to have, and I like the show in general. Although, I don't know, it's almost like beat poetry, sorry, like slam poetry, right at the end, which is not my style of art. My style, like, when I prefer to express myself not in like raw emotion, but always with some detachment, irony, and comedy. So I think that, I don't know, I think in Nanette it works because she has kind of done so much comedy beforehand, and it's kind of like then the long rant at the end sort of contextualizes the jokes. So I think it works. it's not what I would be comfortable doing myself, but I think it's good. Um, Sarah Jane Webster says, I want to thank you for your work, care, and attention that you've put into your videos. I wish there was a way to truly repay you for making me feel a little less alone in the world. Amazon and Patreon will have to do. Oh, thank you, Sarah. Question: what was a childhood, young adult favorite fiction book of yours? Take care. Thank you, Sarah. What was a childhood, young adult favorite fiction book? Well, this is not very original, but I mean, I loved the Harry Potter books when I was growing up. When I was in middle school, I loved Lord of the Rings. That's where me and Lindsay Ellis are in sync. Is that I was a huge like Tolkien nerd right when I was about 14 or 15, and I had like a replica of the One Ring that I used to wear around my neck. It's all very embarrassing. Melissa Boyko says, when I try to justify my decision to transition to my family, professional associates, etc., my argument centers on psychological health. And I'm being honest, it made a world of difference in a way that no therapy, no antidepressant ever did. However, I still struggle with depression, anxiety, motivation issues, social phobia. My emotional palette has acquired 1,000 new shades, but most shades are still painted gray. I feel guilty for not being happy. I'm afraid of chasing the objet petit a forever. I don't know how to pronounce French, I'm sorry. What is it? Objet petit a. Petit a. I don't know how to do French. I'm just over-enunciating an attempt. Do you have any tips on how to deal with the fact that transition isn't the definitive answer to the fundamental existential problem inherent to the human condition? Well, no. I'm sorry, I don't. But I totally sympathize with what you're expressing, because I feel the same way too. Like, when I'm depressed, I feel guilty, and I feel like I can't show the world depression, because what people will see is they'll say, mental illness, this is obviously why transsexuality is bad. Look what it does to people. You know what I mean? Like, I have to be perfect, I have to be happy, I have to be beautiful, everything has to be great, because otherwise that's proof that being transgender is mental illness. And of course it's not. And of course that's bullshit. But I totally know what you mean. And you're right that, like, I think when you start transitioning, there's days when you're so obsessed with it and this goal that's elusive that you feel like, if I could just be a woman, all my problems would be solved. Well, of course that's not true. I mean, look at cis women. Their problems aren't all solved. They have plenty of problems. And like, the best case outcome of your transition is that you just have the problems that they have. So the best case scenario, again, for trans people is that we end up no better off than cis people. Do cis people get depressed? Yes, they do. Do cis people get anxious? Absolutely. Do cis people kill themselves? Yes. So the idea that like transition causes all these things when it happens to trans people is ridiculous. But unfortunately, right, because of the prejudice against us and because of the bullshit oppressive politics that surrounds us, any difficulty that we have in life is framed as a reason why transition is bad. I mean, the cruelest it gets is when they say, half of trans people have attempted suicide. Clearly this is evidence that being trans is a mental illness. Like, clearly this is evidence that we should treat trans people even worse. Like, that is one of the most abusive manipulative talking points I've ever heard. The fact that you're downtrodden proves that you deserve no respect, right? The fact that it's what an awful fucking twisting of an already difficult situation. So yeah, solidarity to you. Nicole Russell says, hello, Natalie, I hope you're well. As I'm sure you've noticed, whether or not to vote for the Democrats is a somewhat tumultuous issue for American leftists. Personally, I feel that stopping the efforts of the Trump administration is important to protecting vulnerable communities, and in this current system, I see few other solutions for harm reduction. Would you share your take on the issue? And will you be doing anything with your channel to encourage people to vote in the upcoming midterm election? So I would say I'm inclined to agree with you that I think that Trump must go by any means necessary. I don't have a junta planned, so my plan is to vote for whoever is against him and his party. Um, will I use my channel to encourage it? Probably. As we come close to the 2018 midterm elections, I probably will try to use my platform to encourage people to throw out Republicans, because I think that's I think that's for exactly the reason you say. I mean, like, is Hillary Clinton wonderful and amazing and perfect? Absolutely not. But also, look what's going to happen to our Supreme Court. Look at how for decades we're going to have abortion on, hanging in the balance, and how for decades we're going to have these problems because we wouldn't, So I agree with you that it's not great to have to vote for Democrats in order to prevent the worst happening to vulnerable communities, but that is the situation we're in, and I'm going to do it. Rachel Priest, I don't know, I'm sorry, how to pronounce that, says, how do you avoid exhaustion and ennui in this political nightmare? I'm very exhausted and filled with ennui. But like, there are ways that I pull myself out of it. For me, like, one of the reasons my videos are funny and why they're like nice, attractively lit and like decorated and things is that in these kinds of like little like crafty activities, I find a kind of solace that allows me to work really hard on it, because otherwise I would burn out so fast if I was just thinking about politics and arguments all the time. Like, I couldn't do it, which is why the humor is there. It's for me as much as the audience, like, because that makes it fun to do this. It's like helps the medicine go down. And same with the, costumes and lights and stuff. Like, it keeps me sane. Like, getting to work on stuff that I find fun makes the misery, it sort of cushions it and makes it tolerable in large doses. Alejandra Herrera says, when you do the next character study video, who do you want to do it on? I vote for Abigail. Yeah, that would be, I've thought about doing it for Abigail. It would be interesting. I worry that I couldn't do it as effectively for Abigail. I mean, one reason why I was able to do Tiffany Tumbles, what I feel is convincingly, is that I created for Tiffany Tumbles outward behavior that doesn't resemble mine and that I think is abhorrent. But Tiffany's like inner world is similar to mine in a lot of respects. And so I think that I could write very authentically for Tiffany. I don't know that I could write very authentically for Abigail. I would have to sort of like, I would really have to spend some time on like gender critical Reddit and stuff like that, listening not just to like TERFs talk about trans people, but listening to TERFs talk about their hopes, dreams, and fears. And then you could start, oh my gosh, I just tore my nail off. Well, that's fine. I need new ones on anyway. Yeah, I think it'd be interesting, but it would require more research, I think, on my part. Sam C says, being from Baltimore, are you a fan of the bands Animal Collective or Beach House? Oh my gosh, I really should be. I feel like everyone I know in Baltimore loves them, but I don't really know their music that well. I hate music. I don't actually, but I never know about bands and stuff. Like, I'm always so ignorant about like local bands and like that's not the kind of music I keep up with, I guess. Like, a lot of the music I listen to now is just like, it's like remixes, dance music, like basic shit. And I also like listen to like, and then I have my basic shit and I have my pretentious shit. My pretentious shit is like the classical music and the jazz and that stuff. It's a gap for like contemporary like genres that bands play. So I unfortunately don't really know them. What was that one? Mountain Goats. Yeah, I don't know Mountain Goats either. Tom Martell says, no question, but I wanted to take a moment to appreciate the call back to Miles Davis, the last video, and Lindsay's last video. Bitches Brew is a great album. Great choice for Tabby. Yeah, I have a bunch of Miles Davis CDs lying around from when I was in high school. And I thought like, because Lindsay's idea to have Tabby have the jazz record. And I was like, I don't know if Tabby's really like a jazz person, but I was like looking at Bitches Brew and I'm like, well, that's just like avant-garde and like, enough that like I can sort of see Tabby maybe being into it. So that's why I chose that one. Um, John Leonard says, Natalie, I love you, but to be honest, I gotta disagree with you about Satie being an amateur. I'm wondering why you say that. I'm just curious. Uh, it was a joke. I don't actually think he's an amateur. I love Satie. I just thought it was funny. I don't know. Yeah, I like Satie a lot. Um, Hold on, I thought I had to sneeze, but I guess I don't. That was super awkward. Okay. Thank you, John. Fox Green says, "Are you coming to the Trans Wellness Conference next week in Philly? It's free Philly meetup." Unfortunately, no. I don't think I'm gonna make it. In part because I have to go to Boston for a thing, and I may actually do a meetup in Boston in a week or so. So I'll post on Twitter about that soon. Um, I'll post on Twitter about that in the next few days, and that's probably the next time I'm thinking of doing a meetup. Sean Tilson, but have fun at the conference. Sean Tilson says, "Sorry about my really long question. Here is a short but difficult one. What is your favorite season of The Wire?" Oh boy. Guys, I have a secret. I have never watched The Wire. I know I should. I live in Baltimore. I have it's crazy that I haven't watched it, but it's the same problem I have with we're talking about at the beginning of the stream. Like, it seems like it's gonna be so serious and so depressing, and it's like, oh, I just can't bring myself to watch stuff like that while I'm eating and cause I'm just too busy to watch stuff like that. I guess you can only handle so much misery, and I should watch it. I will watch it eventually. I promise that I haven't watched it yet. um, okay. Jackalow says, "Have you ever experienced the feeling of not being LGBT enough? And if so, how do you handle these feelings?" Um, that's definitely something I felt right before I started transitioning when I was um, identifying as genderqueer and not just really fitting into anything. I felt I didn't feel like I identified. I didn't feel LGBT enough. But these days, I feel pretty LGBT. Pretty aggressively so. It's just so I don't know that kind of imposter syndrome. At least it's not something I really deal with anymore. But I definitely did, especially since I'm in the lifestyle now. But before I felt like my claim to it was more tenuous. How to handle it? I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of people in this it's a thing a lot of people deal with, who especially bisexual people who are in relationships with opposite sex partners, or some actually heterosexual trans people who are very assimilated. They basically have straight cis they have straight privilege to an extent, or straight passing privilege anyway, right? And I don't know, if I was in a relationship with a man, and especially I don't know, in a few years, if I feel that the trans part of my experience is sort of a historical rather than an ongoing aspect of my existence, and if I were in a relationship with a man, I could see starting to have that worry again. As far as how to deal with it, I mean, I don't know. I would have to sort of know exactly what your situation is, whether it's that you're bisexual in a relationship with a same-sex partner thing, because I would give different advice to different people. Stopping Space says, "How do you feel about the super long AMA questions?" I will probably put a reminder next month. I hope I remember to do this. That I have to read these things out loud. So try not to make me read 4 paragraphs. I think it's just could run smoother, but I keep forgetting to put that disclaimer, so I can't really blame people for doing it. Hold on, let me refresh the page. See what the rest of the questions look like. Figla, I'm looking at this chat. Yeah, bi cis woman with a straight cis dude. Yeah, I know a lot of women who are like that, and they all have this like anxiety about not being queer enough. Um, and some people in LGBT are shitty about that too. They can be like, you don't belong here. That's shitty. Um, that's probably Dan Savage. Dan Savage probably says that. Dan Savage is shitty about bisexuals in general. Um, I understand. I understand why some like Kinsey sixes are suspicious of bisexuals because they feel like, you're just gonna leave me for a same-sex partner, because there is a sort of a pattern of bisexuals often do end up in long-term relationships with um, a opposite sex partner, but I think it's super shitty and short-sighted to rail on bisexuals about that. Tyler Boone says, "Hi Natalie, do you have any thoughts on the rise in popularity and public consciousness of candidates like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? Do you think it's indicative of the beginnings of moving the Overton window of public discourse to the left? I want to hope so, but I'm skeptical since it seems like every time we make minor gains, we face a major pushback. Thanks for continuing to make great content." You're welcome. I feel good about Ocasio-Cortez. I need to look up how to pronounce her name correctly. It's Ocasio. Ocasio. Is that correct? And yeah, I like her a lot. And I think that what she represents is a positive thing. And I think that it will help shift the Overton window. Absolutely. I think that one thing we learned in the last election cycle is that things that have been considered far too radical, well, far too extremist rather, for American politics actually can work if you just never apologize for them. So I think that's what we learned from Trump. And then I agree that Overton window adjusts to accommodate your radicalism. So I think that's potentially effective. Although I'm like you, I'm very anxious. In part because I know in American history, there's a long history of like socialist or far left candidates just losing by a landslide. Going back to like I talked about in my last video, Henry Wallace, right? It's completely not getting anywhere in his, because he was against Truman and the Democrats. So I worry about it. Yeah, I don't know. There's not a lot of precedent in American history for a far left candidate to get to the presidency. There's not a lot of precedent for that. It's worrying. But I sort of alternate, I guess, between like hoping and like noticing the good things and noticing the change in the public discourse, and also worrying about historical precedent. So I've got no good answer to that. Annoyance says, "Do you have any ideas for characters that you haven't been able to implement into your videos yet? I also think you should make a witch or something, but maybe I just think witchy vibes on your channel would look nice." So I've been thinking about I want to do like a vampire kind of character, like kind of like kind of like Maven of the Eventide type look, right? I think that clearly belongs on my channel. So I think maybe for like Halloween, around Halloween time this year, I'll do a very vampiric character. All right, so that's all the questions, and my voice is starting to get hoarse. I really can't talk for long periods of time because my voice isn't strong enough. But I'm gonna go. I've got to work on this script because I'm way behind on my schedule, everything. So tonight I'm gonna be writing my script all night, and I'll post some screen previews and stuff to Patreon once we know what this new video is gonna look like. So thank you everyone for your questions and for listening to the stream, and have a good night. Bye.